I'll shout out the patrons real quick.
What's up, everybody?
Yeah, it looks like we're live. Welcome to the stream. If anyone's joining for the first time, make sure to hit that subscribe button. This is a Vanguard live stream. We have some special news to get into tonight, a lot of cool stories to talk about before we get started. Did just want to let everyone know that you can join the Vanguard community at patreon.com/the Vanguard channel. Here you can join, and then next month and live stream, Vanguardians can actually join in a monthly live stream where you can, join us on screen and talk about the news, maybe be in a Vanguard video yourself. So something to consider if you have a little bit of extra cash on hand. Probably you don't. Not a lot of people do. But if you
don't, you can always just chat us in the live stream comment section. Yeah, for the most part, we just have the Patreon up just as like, I have extra cash and I want to support independent media because obviously, Gavin and I don't.
Yeah, or if you're a super fan and really want to, like I said, come on an episode and chat with us on screen, which is a super exciting thing. So yeah, thanks so much for everyone, being a part of that community. Really appreciate, the support and everything. It means a lot. We're putting in a lot of hard work here. So just wanted to shout that out at the beginning of every live stream and at the end of every video, listed off as well. So just some cool stuff to talk about.
Yeah. Just a sign of appreciation for the people that are helping us, get started over here, which is a cool thing. And everybody that tunes in helps us get started. And if you really want to help us out and you haven't, you can hit that subscribe button.
Yeah, exactly. That's the number one way to, stay up to date with all of our content and keep up with new live streams and interviews. We just did a great interview with Professor Vina Dubal, which we'll be releasing tomorrow. Had a great conversation. So obviously, a lot of good content that you'll want to stay engaged with, keep up to date with. You can hit that notification bell too, so you don't miss the next live stream and be notified when we put out a new video. But without further ado, we can get into
housekeeping over. Elephant in the room, the fucking news shell of the day. Gavin, I guess, do we just want to pile into it? There's been FEC filings for the great Senator Nina Turner to run as a replacement for Representative Marcia Fudge, who currently represents Ohio's 11th district. It's one of the few Democratic stronghold districts in the state of Ohio, which, as we all know from the election, has moved remarkably red over the past, 8 years specifically, because Obama did carry the whole state both times, but Trump also carried it both times. And anyway, this district's gerrymandered as fuck. Just as an aside, it essentially encompasses like it's like Cincinnati all the way to like Akron, and it's one of those like weird districts. So anyway, it's a great place for a Democrat to run because it's one of the few places left in Ohio that the Democrats have gerrymandered in their favor. So just from obviously gerrymandering is wrong, but in this case it would behoove the Democrats and whoever the Democratic candidate is.
And this kind of came as a surprise to me. I mean, it definitely isn't surprising necessarily that Representative Marcia Fudge was nominated to be the HUD secretary. But I guess just a day or two ago was the first kind of, time I heard the rumblings of, if Marcia Fudge is chosen, then that would open up the door for Nina Turner to run for this spot. And I hadn't really even considered that. We've been talking on this podcast about Nina Turner potentially running for governor of Ohio or other ways like that, where she could kind of boost her national profile, maybe in anticipation of a 2024 presidential run or, presidential ambitions at some point later down her career. This, however, I think is honestly an even better, opportunity for Nina Turner than the governor race or really anything else, because it gives her, at least one term in Congress where if she wins her race to really raise her profile, potentially two, before then she could run for president if that's what she so desires. Or if not, she would just be literally the super squad member, like the ultimate squad member, throwing bombs, absolutely calling out who needs to be called out, making it apparent to the American people when her fellow Congress members are not doing their job or when they're not holding up or when they're holding up a vote that needs to be voted on, stuff like that. I think she'll be like the squad times 10, just as far as her presence, her, unequivocating nature, her ability to call out, lies when she sees them or injustices where she sees them. So, I think that this is definitely the right thing to do for Nina Turner. And again, regardless of if it's, kind of to lay the ground for a presidential run or not, I just think it'd be a, great thing for the movement to have this voice in a more elevated national role.
Yeah, and I think that we should handle this in two parts, right? Like, let's handle this in a vacuum, right? So let's assume that, her only plan and her only, mindset, which I imagine is what she'll publicly say for a long time, that, she's only focused on running for this House seat, that she's, not like counting, obviously, you don't want to count your chickens before they hatch, right? But, as people, who are thinking strategically long term, obviously that's a conversation. But setting that aside right now, I think you're 100% correct that this is exactly what this is another spark that the movement needs right now. It needs something. The left has been fucking beat to shit, man. There's been one L after another, and we're gonna get to all of them on this show. But we like to eat our dessert first here at the Vanguard, so we wanted to start with something pleasant, And I think that this is exactly what we needed. We talked about it just the other day on a live stream, kind of how the Bernie Sanders, sort of became the entire movement on the left in this country, almost like he was the single anchor to all of it. And after he dropped out of the presidential race, it felt like a lot of it dissipated, like a lot of like the string that was holding everything together, kind of got snipped, right? And then there was a bunch of, infighting, and that's typically what happens, right, when there's a new progressive push, right? It's if it doesn't go great the first time, fractions start coming out, so you have the Greens, the DSA, all these people that, we've talked about need to unify, obviously, but it's easy to form fractions when you don't have that one candidate that was joining everybody together. And on a smaller scale in the state of Ohio, I think that's exactly what, Nina Turner is going to represent, right? She has the experience, obviously, as a state senator in Ohio. The people there are familiar with her. She obviously has a tremendous amount of national backing, a high profile. She's a fearless leader. And like you said, she's not going to be afraid to go to the mattresses with these fucks in Congress, right? I mean, she's a lady that is going to be fearless. She's going to say what the fuck she thinks. She's going to bravely face all of the ridiculous smears that are going to come her way for the good of the people, because she cares. And I am just so excited. I think that this is a race that she can absolutely win. I think that seeing Congressperson Nina Turner is something that the left desperately needs as an injection and as a way of energizing the movement, and giving us an example of, okay, this is how we can move forward, at least in some capacity.
Yeah, 100%. What's your opinion on whether or not the nature of this run? Do you think she's eyeing the 2024 presidential, ticket on the Democratic Party, or do you think she's really just interested in getting into Congress? I mean, she said on the Young Turks not long ago that she was eyeing the 2024 presidential nomination. So, I mean, I think that you have to figure that into the calculus a little bit here, and I think she clearly is, aware of that on the horizon, obviously, and trying to play her cards in the correct way. Again, I think that this is the right move, because as governor, I always think it looks kind of weird, or it's a bad look when a governor of a state that's midway through their term decides, fuck it, I'm going to run for president, or even a mayor of a city, especially during these times when, the people in those positions are so vitally important for helping their communities. So I think if you're representing the district in Congress rather than, literally serving the state as its governor, I think it's a little bit less of a bad look to kind of, step away from your job to run for president. It doesn't totally just look like a vanity project, like a la Pete Buttigieg, finishing out his last couple years and as mayor, and he decides to run
a small town. Yeah, exactly. No, 100%. And I think that you're I don't want to think, I'm not like, Nina Turner's playing chess, not checkers, guys. Like, of course, I think she's thinking like 13 steps down the line. That's the kind of person that she is. She's obviously, an insightful leader and, somebody who is, thinking strategically. But I just meant as far as what she'll, publicly say and comment on, I imagine that she'll continue to put out this thing, or the statement saying, I'm a public servant, which she absolutely is. And, I will go where the people, want me to be. And I think that she just saw that this was an opportunity for her to represent the people of Ohio, the people that, she cares about, and to represent progressivism in the Midwest. And I don't think this is something that should be overlooked here, guys. We're talking about if Nina Turner gets elected to Congress, we're going to have two of the two most progressive individuals in Congress are going to be Black women elected in the Midwest of the United States in what are red states in the election. So let's just sit on that for a moment and talk about how that might interrupt some of the talking points that are peddled 365 days a year on MSNBC, CNN, where, oh, of course it's impossible for somebody like that to win there. You can't win on this message here, whatever. So I think if nothing else, and I do believe it will be much more, and I am in full support of Nina Turner, setting herself up for a 2024 presidential run, because I think she's absolutely the most trustworthy, outspoken, confident, articulate messenger of the progressive message that we have right now to do this and to run. I think that obviously Bernie Sanders too old to run again, and also I'm just a little bit done and ready for us to move on from that personally. And I think that nobody represents all of the best elements of this movement than Nina Turner.
And also, it's been talked a lot about how the Democrats are probably going to try to force Kamala Harris on us in 2024, and how they're probably going to try to just coronate Harris, kind of like they attempted to with Hillary Clinton in 2016 as their party nominee, without really allowing room for an actual intra-party fight, an actual competition to take place, an actual nominating process. And we've talked about various other people that might have their eye on that too. Andrew Cuomo, Andrew Yang, who we'll get into later too. But I just think from a completely kind of, I guess, cynical identity politics perspective too, that Nina Turner is absolutely the right candidate for the left to embrace for that reason. If she's going to be going up against Kamala Harris, running some white dude isn't going to be as viable, in my opinion. And especially when Nina Turner is someone who isn't afraid to, speak like she's from the working class, isn't afraid to speak like a working class black woman. Kamala Harris is the Democratic Party's Yas Queen figure, but she still kind of conducts herself and talks and acts like she comes from privilege, like she comes from kind of a white, working upper middle class background. You know what I'm saying? Whereas Nina Turner kind of is just the people's champion, undeniably. She, speaks like a fucking preacher in a church. Like she's rousing and passionate. She connects with the working person. She isn't afraid to sit down at a diner and talk to voters, stuff like that. She comes across as a real person, and I just think that quality can be understated. I mean, it's why Kamala did so poorly in the primary. Is her, she couldn't connect with anyone. She came off as fake. She came off as scripted. The only good moments of her entire campaign were
honestly, Kamala has a very like Hillary Clinton kind of presence to me, almost like a very calculated, politically, like you said, scripted, kind of a personality. And I think that, obviously that set her back. Whereas, Nina Turner, I don't know exactly, what faith Nina Turner is, but you can definitely tell that her, religion and her faith, feeds into her politics. But I think you're 100% right that it also feeds into her, oration and, making her an engaging and thrilling speaker. And I think that that's something that the left needs to really consider as important, right? You said like there's going to be swaths of people in the Midwest, working class people of all backgrounds, shades, colors, belief systems, and another big belief amongst working class people of all shades is that the liberals hate people of faith, right? And one thing that we never talk about on the left, and Gavin and I are two secular guys, we've been atheists since, we could form our own opinions. But the one thing that the left has to be careful about is that we can't be the fucking party of, intellectual elitist atheists, the I'm an atheist, fight me party, that's so 2008 and that's Sam Harris's lane, and that's a different club now. So I think that moving forward, leaning into some of that, theological rhetoric, and also that powerful delivery of prose, right? I mean, we look at all of the great leftist leaders, Cornel West, Dr. Cornel West comes to mind as somebody who delivers and is very from that, that theological background, and all the way back to MLK, or even before MLK, William Jennings Bryan, a populist preacher from the 1890s from Nebraska, not far from heart of America kind of stuff. This is something that resonates with people in the heartland, and it's not inherently bad. We talked to Erica, the white trash socialist, about this the other day. A lot of the values that people get instilled with in Midwest are the kind, and even Frank Schaeffer mentioned this. The values that brought him to being a lifelong Democrat and to undo all the work of his father was the teaching of his parents from the Bible, that the egalitarian message, the helping your neighbors, the not coveting, other people's belongings, but sharing, and opening your doors to others, all of these other things. So I think it would be remiss for all of us to on the left to turn our noses up at something so powerful and also something that's so deeply personal to these people when it could be used as a gateway of bringing people in. And I think somebody like Nina Turner would do an excellent job of doing something just like that in a state like Ohio.
100%. And like, to those who think that maybe Nina Turner's too radical or she's too much of an outspoken black woman to win in a place like this, like, we do have to remember that Barack Hussein Obama did win twice, and then 10% of his voters turned around and voted for Trump. So at least 10% of that, base can be won back over. And I think that someone like Nina Turner is absolutely the right kind of person to make that working class case to people that maybe have drifted away from the Democratic Party, maybe have bought into some of the propaganda about how the Republican Party is more working class or more of the working people. And someone like Nina Turner, again, those people that voted for Barack Obama,
or people who never voted
definitely
at all.
Reach back out to those people. Or people that never voted at all. Yeah, because unlike Obama, even at his peak, Nina Turner is actually, in favor of and signed on to concrete, solid solutions that represent the answers to the problems.
With cash stimulus. She's going to support a Green New Deal in Congress, Medicare for all. She's going to support things like free college, eliminating student debt, defunding the police. I think that, I don't know to what capacity she's commented on, her position on defunding the police, because she obviously hasn't been in elected office, and the George Floyd happened after Bernie Sanders. So I'm not sure. But you start to, you imagine that, if you get elected into office, you're going to vote to, get everybody out of jail who was there for nonviolent offenses. You're going to, vote to give everybody stimulus money, cancel debt, both consumer debt and college debt, things like that were all things that were floated by the Bernie Sanders administration. And I imagine that on Nina Turner's own, she's maybe even going to be particularly to the left of Bernie Sanders on some issues, or at least what Bernie Sanders felt like vocalizing in a presidential run if she's running for Congress. I think she's going to have no problem going on CNN, going on MSNBC, as long as they'll put a camera in front of her. And if she gets into Congress, they won't have a fucking choice. Yeah. And going on there and saying, Nancy Pelosi, this is not good enough. This is a disgrace. Yeah. These people need better. You are in the way of this. She's going to be Ro Khanna times infinity.
Yeah, it reminds me of when Cenk Uygur actually was running for Congress. That was basically what he said he would do. He was like, I want to be the squad's like enforcer. I want to be in there, but I want to be like on cable news, not just making the right votes, but actually calling out those that need to be called out and, wagging my finger, making the loud speech on the Senate floor. And obviously that didn't come out to fruition whatsoever. There's a miserable failure of a campaign. But Nina Turner,
what's her face also lost? Christy, the corporate back.
Christy Smith. Yeah. She also lost. But Nina Turner would actually be the squad enforcer. She would get in there and she would be so unequivocal. She would be so unafraid and so unsilenceable, going on cable news and on the Senate floor or the House floor, making the bold case for these policies in the way that can't be denied, in a way that can't be just brushed off or ignored. She really speaks to a moral authority on the left, honestly. When she talks about these issues, you almost have to just sit down and shut up and cede, the power to her, because she clearly is the one that has, like I said, the moral authority. She's so good at channeling that energy. And I think that it just can't be understated. Like, I feel like, even AOC, she's great on Twitter, but like, I still have yet to really see her just, blister the Democratic leadership on the floor of Congress or in Washington in a way that I think Nina Turner would be much more naturally suited to do. I mean, obviously, she already played that role to some extent, and the Bernie campaign of kind of being the attack dog, character, going out and not being unafraid to just go out, call out who needs to be called out, be unequivocal. And I just think that is so often minimized on the left. It's so often ignored as the value of such a strategy. And I think that Nina Turner just really does embody that. And I mean, she was the best part of she was always the best Bernie surrogate in 2016 and 2020, in my opinion. She made the case like no one else. She always rallied up the crowd like no one else. She handles the heat great. She's great on cable news too, because again, regardless of how radical her policies are, she doesn't come off super, radical. She comes off like someone who's interested in improving the conditions of working people of her own community. She comes off as a champion of the people, a fighter for the people. And, voters like that energy, regardless of, whether or not she's on their side or not. Policy, when it comes to the nitty gritty, people simply respond on a very natural kind of, primal level to that leadership. And I mean, similarly with Obama, we've talked about how he had that, thing, that, that quality about him.
Je ne sais quoi.
Exactly. And I think that Nina Turner, has that, and maybe even more. I mean, I think she could. I don't know who she would lose to in a debate. Certainly, none of these Republican clowns. And I mean, I certainly can't imagine someone like Kamala Harris, who again only ever delivers, good lines when they're scripted and rehearsed. I can't see her being able to, and again, we keep talking about this as if it's just laying the groundwork for a 2024 run. I don't want to, discuss it like that. Regardless of that, if she gets into Congress, great thing for the movement. I think it's super exciting. This is a great day. Just something that's super, an injection of kind of opium into the progressive movement, which is so just weakened right now.
Yeah. Or maybe amphetamine is better than opium because I'd rather everybody not pass out. But yeah, I think that this is a great kind of a win. Even though nothing's been won yet, just the fact that this is going to come down, right? So let's not kid ourselves, right? There will be a race. There will likely be a challenger, perhaps one backed by the DNC. Although if they're smart, I mean, it's they're gonna have to back the challenger. They won't cede someone like Nina Turner. I don't think they'll back away from this and just give the left a victory. They never have. So yeah, I think that we have to be prepared for the fact that it'll be a fight. She's going to get relentlessly smeared from all angles. There's a Republican governor right now, and we haven't even seen when he's going to announce the special election. Obviously, this news of Marcia Fudge being placed as HUD, which is an extremely important position in the cabinet that we haven't really broken down. Marcia HUD is not necessarily known as a stalwart for progressives in Congress, but she was better than some of the other people that were being floated. So this is kind of like one of those things that they keep doing where they give us like somebody who would be horrible as a potential floater, and then they put somebody who's pretty milquetoast and inoffensive in instead. And anyway, so yes, there will be a real challenge in this race. I just think that Nina Turner has such a following, such a presence, such a natural gift for politics, and is such a obvious choice for somebody as a public representative and somebody to be in Congress. I think that this is a very, very winnable race, which is why I think we're both really excited about it. Not to pivot too hard though, but other news that's kind of been stirring up. There was a New York Post piece or New York Magazine, I'm sorry, in the Intelligencer the other day, or I believe it was yesterday, reporting that Andrew Yang had been calling elected officials to see if they'd supported him in New York City mayor. Sorry, it was Politico. I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. Politico reported that Yang has been calling elected officials to see if they may support him for a New York City mayor run. And he's also been in touch with the same consulting firm that helped Michael Bloomberg win his third term as mayor. So that's always a vote of confidence if you're a progressive.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. I was like, my excitement levels went quite a bit down as soon as I went one paragraph into this article where, like you said, it says Yang, who of course championed universal basic income program in his presidential run for the Democratic nomination, is also in talks with Tusk Strategies, the consulting firm that worked on Mike Bloomberg's 2009 mayoral campaign. So I'm not 100% sure. I mean, if this is just some completely neutral, business essentially that makes advertisements and promotional material for any candidate of any sort, or if this is
if they work with Mike Bloomberg, they're not freaking neutral.
I mean, any candidate can technically, request or get the help of, a neutral.
Sure, no, I understand. I'm looking at their website right now
to make their ads. In fact, a lot of people thought that Bernie Sanders should have, hired one of these companies like Tusk Strategies instead of going the more independent route, because they're like, bro, if you're serious about winning, you need to run a serious, real campaign to compete with these other, people. So, I mean,
I'm just sus about any company that markets the president of AT&T as a, boasting about how great of work they do on their website. I'm just going through their web. I don't know. I would be sus about it if Bernie Sanders did that. That's one of the things I liked about Bernie Sanders' campaign, is that it was like grassroots through and through. Not that, I think that that's the only way to run a good campaign. And, to be fair,
I mean, I think it would be more to compete with the presence of the other big name people.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. I think that he's probably following whatever guidance he was given and saying, like, this is how you have to run if you want to be successful in the mayor's race. Because like we mentioned when we talked to Carlos Menchaca, I mean, the mayor race, particularly in New York City, is just an auction for the highest bidder or at least it has been.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly the case. And obviously, we'll have to see if Andrew Yang actually declares his candidacy, what kind of tenor his campaign strikes, because we'll see if he leans into the more progressive elements of his presidential campaign, which there were many and which I give him credit for often. But he could also lean into the more, pro-business side of it, like, UBI at the expense of your other social benefits. I'm not going to talk about Medicare for all kind of thing, which would be a lot less exciting. However, given that he's going to be running in New York City, which is, obviously one of the most infamously progressive places in the country, obviously home to AOC and many other recent insurgent progressive victories, I think that he probably will channel a more honestly progressive vision, especially in these times of a coronavirus pandemic. And obviously we criticize Andrew Yang for the way he constructed his universal basic income plan here. And I'm a big advocate for UBI, but I do think we have to give Andrew Yang credit for being a relentless advocate for stimulus checks this entire pandemic, especially going so far as to call out Democratic leadership when many other Democrats, including the squad, would not. So, if he can actually, again, channel some of these more progressive visions, such as decriminalizing all drugs, something he talked about on the campaign trail that no one else did, as well as universal basic income in a way that would be properly constructed, then I think we have a really exciting candidacy on our hands, especially for the mayor of the biggest city in the country, which obviously could serve as the testing ground for all sorts of policies, especially decriminalizing drugs, especially universal basic income policies, which are, again, of needed heightened importance due to the coronavirus pandemic, which is, of course, going to be in the background of everything during this congressional campaign. Obviously, candidates are going to be contrasting their vision for the city with the way that current mayor Bill de Blasio has ran New York City. So I think it'll be an interesting kind of a true battleground of ideas. And hopefully we can have a real battle of ideas that won't just be, the highest bidder basically winning the race and flooding the airwaves. Hopefully we can actually see some good debates and the best vision wins out, but who knows?
Yeah, and I actually think you're completely right that should Andrew Yang, win the presidency, in some, run for mayor and win, we would be able to really get to see, does his solution bear out, right? Because you would get to see a hyper-capitalist, society like the one but in an uber concentrated area like New York City, and, see how much it does alleviate the suffering of the working class when you have skyrocketing rent prices and, economic devastation, but you are able to give them UBI. To what degree does that course correct? To what degree does that alleviate their suffering? And to what degree is business able to, mobilize and pivot to, further capitalize on those people's remaining income? I think that the other questions that I have for Andrew Yang, and, if he's going to run for mayor, and one of the things that I would really be excited to see is his platform. Because you're right, we're obviously jumping the gun. And, my preconceived notions and understanding of Andrew Yang's politics, are obviously, leading me to believe that he's going to be friendlier to the Wall Street types in, New York City than somebody maybe like Carlos Menchaca, who we've talked to on the podcast, because of his business inclinations, his friendliness with Silicon Valley, his own status as an entrepreneur, and the fact that he's, run on this whole reformed capitalist idea for presidency. The couple of things that I would be really interesting to see him talk about would be, one, how to what extent does he support building new public affordable housing in places like Manhattan, Brooklyn, places that, I don't want to just see it all shoved into the back corner of the Bronx and Queens, right? And this is something that I think will really show if he's going to put his money where his mouth is, because there's tremendous financial opposition to getting any kind of what would be considered really affordable housing for working people on Manhattan, right? So that's something that the mayor has a lot of power to do in New York City, would be to push for public city resources to go to constructing public housing, and creating a city, that can actually be livable and inhabitable for people from all economic backgrounds. So that would be one thing that I would be really looking forward to seeing how he responds to that, because I think that'll be telling on how he's going to position himself, either progressive or more neoliberal. The second thing that I would really look for, and to be honest, I don't follow Andrew Yang really religiously, so I'm not sure what he's tweeted about this or what he's talked about. But the other thing that the New York City mayor has a lot of undue power for and is able to really make a lot of moves on would be defunding the NYPD, reallocating a lot of those funds there, closing Rikers Island, decarceration. So, we talked about how Andrew Yang did mention legalization of all drugs in his campaign, decarceration, prison abolition. Those were not words that were thrown around. So, it would be interesting to see where how he understands the moving towards the legalization of all drugs and how he would plan to implement a decarceral strategy in New York City. Because if he were willing to, in a meaningful way, get behind things like housing reform and decarceration and, defunding the NYPD to reallocate those funds, for things that would be more beneficial for working class people, if that's something that he's truly interested in, I could see myself being interested in him as a viable contender. But if not, I think it would illustrate that he might go another way in an office.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I agree that he'll, my preferred ideal candidate for this would definitely be someone that's outspoken on those issues. I will say that he did say that mass incarceration was the greatest civil rights issue of our time during his campaign. And also came out against, mandatory minimums and the war on drugs and all that kind of stuff. So I wouldn't say he's, totally never brought it up or never.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm not 100% sure what his position on that would be.
Yeah. So, he's definitely not a leader out in the streets, but I do think he's, he's given more of a fair shake to the movement than your average Democrat. So I think that's, again, he always kind of treads that line.
Before he got into office, that's something that Bill de Blasio would have done. You know what I mean? Like Bill de Blasio endorsed Bernie Sanders, but it seems like the mayor. This is just why I'm skeptical, because it seems like the mayoral candidates always clam up as soon as they get into office when it comes to the NYPD. I'm pretty sure they must get like a backroom fucking. There's always those jokes about how you get into office, and it's like, hey, unless you want like a fucking citywide coup, you better not cut the police budget, because otherwise we're gonna fucking break your kneecaps.
And that's another thing that throughout the entire defund the police and Black Lives Matter movement that I've always said is that I do kind of feel bad in a sense for some of the local officials that are tasked with these like decisions, because there's not really a whole lot of trial and error that's gone on. It's kind of like, do we respond to this demand and do this unprecedented thing, or do we not? You're put in a very precarious position as a person, as like a mayor or something in that situation. So I think that you definitely want to come at it from a place of having the right policy, knowing, like, not rushing to it, not hastily passing some new budget that does. Like, you need to have a very long conversation and figure out the perfect way to do it. Sit down with the right community advocates and make sure that money is reallocated into the right places, because obviously when it comes to those kind of things, you don't just want to see social services defunded. You want them to be reallocated into the right places. So I think that there's innovation that needs to be done there, and hopefully Andrew Yang is able to bring to the table some. If he's elected mayor, or if he runs for mayor, it would be great if he really does spotlight those issues. Criminal justice. I'm going to sit down with the local chapter of Black Lives Matter or X, Y, and Z civil rights advocacy groups that I want to hear their demands. I want to know their perspective, what I need to do as mayor. That's something that I hope to hear coming from him rhetoric wise, if he does declare a run for mayor, because obviously New York City has some of the worst inequalities. We see obviously the one of the most classic examples of the unfairness of the drug laws is the fact that on Wall Street you can be walking around with cocaine in your bag and doing it every half hour, but then someone in a less well-off area of New York City might get busted for smoking crack or doing some other drug that's technically also illegal. So we have these rampant inequalities, and like I said, it is good that Yang's acknowledged those, but hopefully he leans into that more in his campaign, because obviously he understands a lot of the right issues. I think it's just kind of a matter of making sure he goes in the right direction. I feel like Andrew Yang is the ultimate candidate that could be pressured to do the right thing if there's the right movement and the right activism there to pressure him. But I
actually would agree with that. I think that by my diagnosis, I think his natural proclivity would be to make some of the wrong choices, and I think that he would naturally listen too much to the technocratic class and to the Wall Street big money oligarchs. But I do think that you're right that unlike a lot of other candidates from the Democratic Party, I would say 95% of them, he actually could be moved from the people, and he seems like and that could be just because he doesn't have a lot of experience in politics, and he might, become a cynic really quick because this is a man that's never held elected office before. We don't really know how he'll govern. He could clam up and become a fucking piece of shit as soon as he gets into office. It's really easy to walk and talk the talk before you have to govern. Making votes and pissing off your donors is hard if you have them, right? So that's something that we have to, a caveat that we just have to lay out there. He's never been in elected office, so we don't know. Because I think he could just as easily, like you said, he could just as easily go either way. My estimation is that he's more likely to go in a way that I'm not super thrilled with.
Yeah, that's fair. But I also think it's a matter of adjusting our expectations. I mean, obviously, I would prefer if Carlos Menchaca, who we talked to on our show, won the race. Obviously, he's in favor of all the right things. But when we have this, dynamic where all of a sudden someone like Andrew Yang enters the race who actually could win, that makes me get excited because previous to that, I personally don't really think Carlos did have a shot of winning. I mean, as much as I loved his vision, same with some of the other progressive voices that are running. So for me, it's more of just like, well, I agree that he's not perfect. Out of the people that could potentially win this thing, I think it's still overall a good thing because I do think he's a lot better than the competition. In particular, I believe his name is Scott Stringer. Who's a real milquetoast, big money corporate guy. Totally, I mean, just look at him. I mean, this is not someone who would be innovating or leading the way. He's not someone that's even there rhetorically. I mean, the bare minimum, Andrew Yang advocates for a lot of the right things rhetorically. He advocates for UBI. He advocates for ranked choice voting, decriminalizing drugs. So I just think from that perspective, from a realist perspective and understanding that, we probably aren't going to get someone who's, going to check off every box. I think Andrew Yang would be a hell of a lot better mayor than fucking Michael Bloomberg, Rudy Giuliani, and Bill de Blasio combined.
Yeah, for sure. And who's the other guy that's running? Oh gosh, he's the Brooklyn president.
Eric Adams. Yep.
But anyway, yeah, that guy was a former cop, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, yeah, then I certainly prefer Yang over him as well. And luckily, it seems like according to this poll, most residents of the city do as well. It looks like 20% of respondents said that Yang would be their top pick, at least according to one poll. And 14 listed Adams and 11% listed Stringer. So it'll be interesting to see how the ranked choice voting comes into play in this election, because that is another aspect to this race that makes it more interesting. And it looks like, according to this, another heavily rumored candidate is Council Speaker Christine Quinn. So there's a few other, this could get interesting. And
there's a lot of names floating around right now.
Which is actually why Andrew Yang considered apparently running as a third party, maybe a working families party or something. I guess he's decided against that. But so, again, this could go a lot of interesting ways. And just because Yang's running, again, it's not like that's at the expense of all other progressive voices. We're going to keep talking to candidates on our show that we think have the right vision. We're going to be talking soon with a mayoral candidate, Diane. I forget her name, but yeah, she's a really progressive candidate who's running, in favor of everything we were just talking about, defunding the police. Diane Morales is her name. I apologize. She's a great candidate. So I think there's a lot of good voices in here that have the potential to bring really interesting ideas to the fold. And I'm excited to see how this race, shakes up. It'll be cool to see what happens. And again, we talked about Nina Turner, potentially, boosting her profile in a national way. This would be, just about the biggest boost to Yang's profile he can imagine. I mean, all three of the last mayors of New York City have gone on to run for president at various points, post being mayor.
All of it ended up going abysmally. Nobody's
yeah, but I do think Andrew Yang, and then that's another thing which really does prove how much of a money grab it really, or much of a money contest it really was. The fact that Michael Bloomberg and fucking Bill de Blasio, who aren't exactly the most inspiring or passionate candidates, could win those, the mayoral position in New York. I think Andrew Yang's a much more, in my opinion at least, charismatic and like he's just more relatable, more human, someone that seems more inspiring to me certainly than someone like a Bill de Blasio, or because it's always talked about how Bill de Blasio ran as a progressive and like he pretended to be progressive and then betrayed like if you watch the documentary about Anthony Weiner's campaign for mayor of New York City, which is just called Weiner, great documentary, and it kind of goes into his sex scandals.
Weiner loved his Weiner too much.
Yeah, and it goes into all that. It's a great documentary exploring his run for mayor and how that went down as that was going on. But he was actually in many ways out-lefting Bill de Blasio on a lot of issues. He was a lot more outspoken on a lot of leftist issues, a lot more passionate, frankly, a much better candidate if it weren't for all the sexual impropriety. So this notion that Bill de Blasio, like, oh, he was just like Andrew Yang too before he got into office, like I don't think that's entirely true. Bill de Blasio was always a milquetoast, kind of semi-corporate fuck. And to be honest, if it weren't for Anthony Weiner's dick pic thing, he wouldn't even be fucking mayor right now. So I don't think that's quite a fair comparison to make. I think Andrew Yang really did, put himself out there by embracing a policy that really wasn't very popular when he entered it into the discussion. I think it was polling at like 20%.
He also supported Medicare for all and walked it back as soon as he thought it wouldn't be politically salient. So he's not like immune to walking back on it. Like I listened to him on the Joe Rogan podcast talk about the need for Medicare for all. Like he really believed it, and it was actually a pretty inspiring message. And then have him backpedal. Oh, I believe in the spirit of Medicare for all. So I don't know. I think that there's no way to know for sure until he actually gets into elected office and is forced to make a tough decision which way he goes on that. So
yeah, that's all my point is that I think he's a lot more promising than any of these other candidates.
That is true. That is probably true. That's probably true.
And again, when it comes to the company that he'll be in, Rudy Giuliani, namely Michael Bloomberg and Bill de Blasio, I just think that he's in a whole other league when it comes to his ideas, when it comes to his basic philosophy behind governance and the way that government should operate. I don't know. And I also do follow him, not closely, but I keep up with what he talks about. And I just have to say, I have been consistently impressed by the way that Andrew Yang, he's kind of like a Ro Khanna in the sense that I genuinely believe that while he may be a little bit more comfortable in the Silicon Valley world of fucking rich people or whatever, that may be true. I do think his heart is in the right place. I do think he understands for and is trying to advocate for positions that will, benefit the working person, the common family that needs money on their table. I genuinely do think his heart is in the right place. And I agree with all your criticisms. Again, for me, it's just like, if he could give a lot of these a lot of these issues a national platform, I think that's in the best interest in the movement. And I just think he's a likable, humanistic kind of guy that is able to bridge the gap between, that's why he was considering running third party or independent. I don't think he really feels in the heart of hearts like he's a Nancy Pelosi Democrat or whatever. I genuinely feel like he's trying to, kind of figure out what works. And I think his, bipartisan or not bipartisan, but anti-partisan approach is in some senses innovative for how we should look to, movement building and reaching across the aisle, picking up some of those disaffected Obama voters that turned around and voted for Donald Trump. I think his approach has been admirable.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I'm gonna reserve any further criticisms until the man actually legislates on something. But for right now, I think it'll be interesting to see how he decides to run his campaign. Another really big bombshell that I saw today that I wanted to get your reaction to was, the fact. Well, obviously, John Kerry, former presidential candidate, former Secretary of State, current recently appointed special presidential envoy for the climate. Has recently kind of come out and given some of his plans for, kind of what he thinks the priorities will be. And he's the founding member of this think tank called the American Security Project, which is this obviously very neoliberal corporatist think tank out of Washington. And they released what they described as the three priorities that Kerry will have as his role as the president's essentially right-hand man on climate. And I just wanted to read off and get your reaction to these three priorities. One, a huge rebuilding of the United States military bases. Keep in mind, this is the man whose job is to fight climate change. So a huge rebuilding of the United States military bases, working on countering China in the Pacific, and preparing a war with Russia in the newly melted Arctic. Those are the fucking top three things that he wants to do as special presidential envoy for climate. It's like, oh, you're not the fucking war hawker from Secretary of State anymore, John Kerry, but you don't give a fuck. You only care about war. You only understand war. You only understand terror. And it's unfucking believable that this happened. I am so
Were you really not expecting this to happen? Like
no.
John Kerry and stuff?
It's just like the fact that this is the whole thing is all about war. Yeah, I'm a little surprised that it's this much about war. I'll be honest. Maybe that was naive, and maybe I should fucking, I am surprised that I thought, nothing. I thought that it would be a lot more like, I don't know. I don't know. I thought maybe a little bit more towards like making money. I'm surprised that this was all about like, yeah, let's like fucking imperialism and bulk up our shit. Like that was naive of me, but I am, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it is about making money. That's the defense contractors and our national security state or whatever you want to call it.
Now we know. Well, now we know why he's cool with that. Like now we know why he's cool with saying that he's going to move on from fracking. Right? He's found like the new racket for climate change is this.
Yeah, I remember when Elizabeth Warren was talking about like making the military green or whatever, and she was supposed to be the second most progressive option we had. Like that was her like fucking solution to climate change was like, let's, make the military more eco-friendly. So I guess that aspect of her campaign has made its way into the Biden administration. This is just totally, I guess, disgusting and a huge rebuilding of the United. Like, are they crumbling? Do we need a rebuilding of our military bases?
I mean, that's the other thing that we're not talking about. But actually, as I always fucking almost call him. I also call Joe Biden an Biden bomb, a Democrat. But, like Joe Biden, he as he's taking office, they're gonna embark on rebuilding and revamping all of the fucking nuclear weapons that the United States has. And and on top of that, I just want to talk about the fact that preparing for war with Russia. So let's just lay that out for everybody, because we're about to have an expiration in our nuclear arms agreement with Russia. And again, I'll be honest, a lot of the thought process behind me voting for Joe Biden, of which I don't even want to talk about anymore, was the fact that I thought that it was a no-brainer for him to at least get back in New START, which is the nuclear agreement between the United States and Russia. Reading things like this, I'm just like, I think that may not happen, actually. And I think that I don't know. From a foreign policy perspective, I think the left is in a really bad fucking shape for the next long time. I mean, you think about the fact that Trump has effectively signaled that he's going to do anything that it takes to cripple the United States' relationship with Iran. I mean, essentially, Iran is demanding that immediately after Joe Biden take office and is inaugurated, that they lift the sanctions that are or at least a portion of the sanctions that are being imposed by the Trump administration on Iran. And, through all this shit and the way that he staffed his cabinet, we can get into the fact that General Lloyd Austin was just appointed to defense secretary just after. He's actually not even just after. He's still currently sitting on the board of directors for Raytheon, one of the most powerful weapons manufacturing companies in the world. Speaking of Elizabeth Warren, based out of her home state, that was a big reason why she always supports the inflated military budget and never stands up to them. But anyway, I mean, it's just been one disaster after the other. And, I'm honestly like, I don't even know what, I mean, it's like the worst you could have imagined.
Yeah, honestly. And I mean, obviously the Democrats have been kind of amping up this pretty dangerous and, quite frankly, pretty xenophobic rhetoric against Russia ever since that Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton, or at least electoral college wise, beat Hillary Clinton in 2016. It will be interesting to see, if that rhetoric does translate directly into increasingly hawkish foreign policy and under the Biden administration, or was it just, kind of the MSNBC ratings game to try to, keep the Democratic base, entertained while Trump was in office so that they could hype up the next, you know what I'm saying? Or what is it actually something that these people believe in and it's going to translate into foreign policy? If that's the case, that's terrifying because Russia, as everyone knows, is, another nuclear armed superpower. And in my opinion, we have no business escalating in really any way with any nuclear armed superpowers. So it'll be really interesting to see how this shakes out.
And not only that, this is the dude who oversaw the escalation in Afghanistan, Yemen, Iraq, and Syria under Obama. So, I mean, and it's not just General Austin, right? It's Michelle Flournoy, former Homeland Security Director, Jen Johnson, also a part of the new appointments. All of these people who were essentially, these were the people that did Yemen in the first place. These are the people that got us into Syria in the first place. All of these, supporting the Saudi coalition to, basically feed weapons to Saudi Arabia so that they could begin waging this horrifying genocidal war in Yemen. I mean, this was all under the stewardship of General Austin and Barack Obama and all these individuals. And it's just, and now, obviously you have even as far removed as a special envoy on the climate. And of course, anybody who listens to this show, anybody who, pays attention to the climate, we know that the military is the number one fucking polluter in this country. And, another thing that I always harp on when we talk about the climate change, because I've been terrified ever since I read Gwynne Dyer's book, The Climate Wars, is the fact that as heat rises, you have a bunch of simultaneous things that are going to go on. You're going to have mass displacement of people who are brown in skin color, moving to cooler places, which are typically inhabited by people with white skin color. So you have, centuries of racial hierarchy and, prejudices that are going to be, fed rapidly by the ownership class in order to keep these people whose, homes have been destroyed through no fault of their own by the pollution that has been done by those Western people who are then demanding that they be kept out. On top of that, as heat rises, you're going to have conflicts. I mean, people forget. I mean, we've been talking about our own nuclear conflicts because, that's important and that's what we're involved with. But there are other nuclear conflicts that go on all the time that the United States aren't even privy to. As heat rises, India and Pakistan, they're going to have beef.
Yep.
That's nuclear power competing right there. You have, obviously, there's the whole thing right now. Iran is now once again enriching uranium because after the United States stopped, basically withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal, they, for a while they were still following it, but then after, essentially massive provocation from the Trump administration, them doing anything to inflame and incite a war with Iran, this, fucking maniacal, just murderous. I don't know. I mean, these have essentially just been targeted assassinations. I mean, essentially this was conducted by the Israelis this time, but in the past with Qasem Soleimani, it was otherwise. So this escalation of forced tension to continue with Iran and, essentially sow doubt that they're attempting to become feed into this idea that they're now trying to become a nuclear power, even though they were participating in the agreement anyway beforehand, before we provoked them. So anyway, this is a roundabout way of just saying we're all fucked.
Yeah, and especially also because we started this conversation off by talking about how, John Kerry is the special presidential envoy for climate. And that reminds me of the special presidential task force that Joe Biden put together with none other than Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
No, he's going to listen to John Kerry, though.
Yeah, and it was with John Kerry and AOC, that task force. And it's moments like these where I really do kind of start to find myself on the side of things where I'm like, is AOC, by even participating in things like that, does that not just make her, a prop of the Democratic Party to make these horrific policies look cool, to get people like me and you to continue to, go along with their fucking game? Like, and obviously I'm not saying that the Republicans are any better. I'm not playing that fucking game. But I do think there's something to be said. And it's announcements like this. It's seeing, this list like this from the ASP that does make me really question, whether or not someone like AOC being a part of this task force with Biden and Kerry, when this is going to be the result anyway. Of course, you have to keep in mind, John Kerry was the Democrat who wanted to run against Bush on an also pro-war platform. He didn't even come out against the Iraq war at the most obvious time to do so, at the most, morally imperative time in the country's modern history to do so. He decided to also be a pro-war candidate, which is hilarious. And, of course,
he was running after a dude who didn't even, John Kerry served in the war. George Bush was partying in the fucking National Guard during Vietnam. And
John Kerry's, refusal to completely and utterly denounce the war, and then not only that, but then losing to George Bush and giving him another, he should be persona non grata from the Democratic Party, let alone polite society. But here we have.
Remember when he was going to save the party if Joe Biden couldn't get us across the line?
Yeah. So, there you go. Right when it looked like Bernie Sanders was actually going to win, he was like stewing about how he could stop this, progressive grassroots populist uprising. How the fuck can I take down all these, working people that want healthcare and, more equality? Like, what are we going to do to stop this? That was his thought. So, fuck John Kerry and fuck Joe Biden for appointing him to the fucking climate envoy. Like, if you actually give a shit about AOC and the Sunrise Movement, who she obviously often speaks for, then like, what is this? This is not like what? Okay, I guess I just don't know what to make of this. And it's moments like these where I find myself truly and more cynical about the Democratic Party than ever, more willing and enthusiastic about fucking abandoning on them and pissing on their fucking grave.
Yeah, dude. Well, I mean, in times like this, I think it's really important that we don't overlook the real hardship. Who's been hit really hard by this pandemic, and it's often, we're often guilty. It's often not in the places that you might think. So thankfully, we have the economists to remind us of who's really being hit hard by this pandemic, Let's see here. Just to read the headline for anybody, Bartleby at the Economist. How the pandemic is forcing managers to work harder. Remote work brings benefits to employees and employers alike, but requires more effort on the part of executives. Gosh, it must be hard to be a C-suite executive in the midst of one of the worst economic recessions of our nation's history. God, you do not want to be rich right now, do you, Gavin?
Oh no, it would be horrible to just be stuck inside ordering fucking Uber Eats for every meal while your employees.
You actually have to tell your employees what to do. Make sure that you're surveilling them so that they conduct their work in a way that is, most profitable, a way that will maximize your bottom line. Gosh, that must be stressful. I'm happy that I'm just a peon who doesn't have to deal with such complicated thinking.
Even look at this fucking graphic, like this poor manager over here, all his fucking employees are reaching out of the screen, just, taking up all of his time and energy. This poor man's just trying to relax and, smoke a cigarette and have a gin and tonic, and all these goddamn fucking employees just reaching out of his screen directly into his fucking life.
I have to profit off of all of you.
Yeah,
I was trying to drink wine in the shower and listen to Pod Save America because we're all gonna die and life is very hard for me. And I don't even know if you turned into Rachel last night, but Trump is a fascist and he's ruining all of our lives. And we're the ones that are really, really suffering from all of this. It's the tax code, what it is. Oh, geez, Lord, I don't even want to talk to you about the tax code right now. But really, what it is it's just I've seen a really large increase in the number of Slack messages that I've been required to respond to. And my employees, they don't even consider my mental condition before they Slack me how many gin and tonics I've put away. I mean, Jesus Christ, it's 3 p.m.
Yeah, this is about the most tone-deaf fucking article ever written, especially in these times, when we literally have an entire, class of human beings in this country that's basically just become the sacrificial fucking class of essential quote unquote workers so that these corporations
essential enough to be sacrificed.
Yeah, so that fucking corporate America can keep churning in the background of this national disaster which is yet to be significantly addressed by our elected officials. Here we have this fucking Bartleby talking about how the managers are the ones that are really, taking the brunt of this, and how they're the ones that need our sympathy. When, and again, people are literally dying for $8.50 an hour, exposing themselves and their families to, a deadly fucking virus for, less than a living wage, let alone benefits. So yeah, and this is fuck the Economist.
Yeah, I mean, fuck. I found out that the place I get my fucking haircut from, Gavin. And this is but essentially the owners of the place where I get my haircut, great reporting coming from the Beacon, Kansas City, if anybody's curious about this specific example, but this haircut salon in Kansas City, Chop Tops, a lot of people go there. Mm-hmm. Essentially the owners went on vacation to Cabo or something and got COVID, and then came back into work, exposed all their employees, didn't tell anybody. When their employees started to get pissed off, they started firing people. When it broke to the news, they took down their social media and their their Facebook and their Instagram, and multiple reports of complaints against them went to the city. The city basically, this would be Kansas City. The city just called and let them know that they needed to do a refresher on the policies. There was no actual recourse. That. This is what's going on in our country on a real level. So when you go in places, really remember that more often than not, they probably don't give a fuck. So wear a mask and wash your hands. Yeah,
it's pretty crazy to see just the total. Yeah, that's fucked up. I can't believe that. They knew they had COVID, but they wanted. If I knew I had COVID, I would want to be quarantining it inside. I wouldn't want to.
No, they didn't want because they wanted to be able to oversee their employees, make sure that they knew. And then if it came out that they did have it because they got their employees sick, and then the other employees like they didn't want to give them time off when they got COVID. They didn't want them to tell anybody. They wanted them to lie to the customers and tell them that they hadn't had any COVID cases, like all kinds of fucked up shit.
Damn, that's crazy. And it's also, of course, especially what makes it even more unfortunate is that all the businesses that are doing the right thing, but that are still getting fucked anyway. I mean, we see tons of places that are trying their best to prepare for the winter, restaurants that are trying desperately to retain their, small sliver of business, which was their outside patios. Now they're having to install pretty expensive, heating lamps and all that kind of shit to even have the hopes of remaining in business, because obviously the government's not bailing people out. So yeah, that's a multi-pronged sword that all of society is just kind of getting fucked by right now. But yeah, I mean, let's all just take a minute to, just feel bad for those managers, because they're the real ones out here that are taking the brunt for us.
Yeah. Just one last story from me. That was something that I wanted to make sure that we commented on today, just because it's something that hasn't been getting enough national media coverage, in my opinion. And that's the fact that Attorney General William Barr is on a maniacal, unconscionable, villainous, just completely, I mean, I'm trying to find the right word for it, just psychopathic rampage to execute as many federal prisoners on death row as possible. And I wanted to just bring up, obviously Gavin and I don't support the death penalty under any circumstances. It's wrong, and it's so often used to punish young Black men, and disproportionately. There's so many nonprofits out there that are doing work and finding that as many as 11-12% of these men who are it's typically men, though there is one woman who is slated to be sentenced to death. It's typically Black men in the South that are found guilty of these crimes and sentenced to death for crimes that they later find out to be innocent of. And even times when there is DNA evidence suggesting their innocence, the state kills them anyway. So I just wanted to raise the story quickly here of Brandon Bernard, who at age 18 was an accomplice to what was a devastating and brutal murder of a couple who was traveling to Texas at the time, and they were essentially what you would consider and would have been portrayed in the 90s or turn of the century, 2000. I think it was the late 90s. This occurred. Is a good white Christian couple, right? There was a gang of five boys, all of them Black. That it was essentially a robbery gone wrong, right? They put the people in the trunk, and then one of the five boys, shot the couple in the head. Just a week ago, that man was put to death as part of this same case. Brandon Bernard was 18 years old. He did not kill either of those individuals. He was driving the car. He actually wasn't there when they were initially kidnapped, but they did use his car to drive them around. They stole the people's ATM card and were trying to get their money out of it. I mean, obviously this is a horrible crime. And this is not an attempt to diminish that, but what everybody has to understand is that this man, Brandon Bernard, is about to be executed for a crime that he committed when he was 18 years old, in which he did not commit the act of murder. He was driving the car. So this is a guilty by association sentence from an 18-year-old. When you're 18 years old, you are a boy.
By the way,
your brain is not developed.
I'll remind everyone that fucking Kyle Rittenhouse made bail not long ago for actually killing people in cold fucking blood, first degree murder. Just so you know.
So exactly. So
this is like horribly depressing, just absolutely crushing. And you're totally correct that and increasingly studies find that increasing amounts of people executed, especially Black men, are in fact innocent, which is just horrific to think about. And it's ultimately why the death penalty is untenable, because even if 1.5 or point whatever percent of people aren't actually guilty, I mean, even if they were guilty, it would still be extremely morally fucked up. But even the fact that
why do we want to reduce ourselves to that level, right? That's my opinion. And I'm not going to make an argument, because people always want to fucking do this. They're like, Ted Bundy was never going to be fucking rehabilitated, and it's like, yeah, that's fine. We don't have to build our society around Ted Bundy, right? So that was one guy that you think had to be fucking killed. Guess what? I think it would have been all right if we just kept him in a jail cell.
And also with death row, usually these people end up staying in death row for like decades before this.
25. This year, I mean, he's 40 now. This man, Brandon Bernard, is 40 years old.
It's not like the taxpayer or whatever is getting off like scot free. Like, no, this guy's, he's still going to be in the, or not this guy in particular, but people that are on death row are still incurring massive amounts of taxpayer, costs. They're costing the state money. It's not like, because a lot of times people say, oh, just kill, the death penalty, just get rid of them. That way the taxpayer doesn't have to, feed them and house them via the jail their entire lives. But as we see, the death row cases often go on just as long, and with all the legal cases and challenges, it ends up racking up just as much of an expense at the end of the day. So there's really no argument, not financial, definitely not moral. And again, the fact that any innocent people are ever killed, let alone fucking imprisoned, for something they didn't do, or something that a racist jury and somewhere, or
one
whatever.
non-white juror in this case, by the way.
Exactly.
And I just have one more thing to say about this, because I think it's important, and you're right that there's a component of this that's not moral, though I think the moral one is so profound and so obvious that it's worth pounding home for people anyway. Look at the picture of that individual right there. Look into that person's eyes. When you take somebody's life, when you execute them, or you are part of a society that is putting a human being to death, you are dehumanizing yourself, just like somebody who takes the life of another individual. So when somebody commits murder, right, they dehumanize themselves. There's something inherently non-human about taking another life, right? That you lose a part of yourself, okay? And we as a society cannot continue to perpetuate that regardless of guilt, right? Because, and we could get into the decarceral podcast another time with an expert, right? Because there are people far more competent who can speak on it than us. But I just want to leave it at that. From a humanity standpoint, how can we justify taking somebody's life for taking somebody's life? In which case, this guy didn't actually pull the trigger anyway.
Yeah, and a lot of times these cases, they're literally, this guy was 18, but I remember one time I was watching like some reality TV show that was like Inside Death Row, and one of the inmates was a similar story. I think when he was 16, he was an accomplice, like one of 3 teenagers. A robbery went wrong. They ended up murdering the victims. Again, this was when he was 16. On the show, he was like 40 on death row, totally clearly in every way a changed person, felt so, had spent the last, 20 years, he grew up in jail reflecting on this one act of fucking horrific violence. So clearly he's a, very changed person. You can tell listening to him and hearing him out that he was, he was like started a church in the, prison. He was trying to like tutor other inmates, and he was a big, avid reader. There's no reason that that's a person that should be executed for something they did when they were a child, probably coming out of a, or likely coming out of a family that maybe wasn't, well off economically, maybe didn't have great role models. There's a lot of fucked up societal things that lead people to make bad decisions, and obviously not to excuse that, but as a society, you're absolutely right. There's so many better, more productive, more moral ways to, handle rehabilitation and, actually solving the root issues rather than just fucking killing people like fucking savages. So yeah, I think this is disgusting, and it absolutely, represents just the most disgusting, barbaric, most low points of the entire fucking Trump administration, which is at its core, a disgusting, the fact that these people call themselves pro-life is so fucking disgusting and hilarious.
Yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to raise that point, and Brandon Bernard, without barring any miracle, is going to be put to death on Friday in Indiana. So, yep. That is the way that it is. Yeah.
Rest in peace, preemptively, I guess. But that is super fucked up. Yeah. That's a super dark note to end things on. So I hope that, as this person says, abolish the death penalty. Absolutely, 100%. It needs to happen. It should be something that's talked about, honestly, more by the left. I think it is a glaring moral, hole in our society that absolutely should be. Also, as Salisa here says, the drugs they use and lethal injections can torture people. I've seen videos of people having like seizures for up to like 10 minutes until, they administer the right drug or more of the same drug just to finish them off. So like, this is not, this isn't.
It's a human rights issue for sure.
Yeah. So. It's not just like, oh, we flip a switch and it goes night night. or it's not like in Oregon where you get assisted suicide and they give you essentially a huge dose of morphine and you fall asleep feeling happy. No, it's like often, very violent, very, if it goes wrong, either the electric chair or lethal injections can be extremely torturous, extremely painful, extremely archaic, and, not something you would expect to see in a civilization that literally has codified into one of its amendments the barring of cruel and unusual punishment. Wouldn't death be considered cruel, let alone being locked in a jail your entire life? So again, sorry to end things on a bad note or a very negative note, but that is the reality of this.
That's
country.
our world. It's the way it is.
That is the world. And if you enjoyed this live stream tonight, make sure to subscribe, everyone. We enjoyed, hanging out with you guys tonight and talking about the news. Luckily there's some exciting stuff too. Obviously, we talked about Nina Turner potentially, or declaring her, filing the paperwork to run for Congress. So that's something to be excited about.
And federal death federal deaths were suspended for the first time under George Bush. So the moral imperative is not necessarily with the president. So there is still work that can be done if you're looking for a more positive note. But yeah, thanks to everybody for tuning in tonight. And if you haven't yet, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, tell your friends about the Vanguard, and support independent podcasting and media like the Vanguard. But anyway, thanks for chatting with us, everybody, and have a good night.
Yep. Everyone enjoy your night, and we'll see you next time on the Vanguard.
Yeah, we'll be doing a stream, I think, tomorrow on Mank.
Oh, yeah. Hell yeah. Cool.